tuned in to Beyond the Known. On a calm winter evening in 1945, the Atlantic lay still like polished glass. 5 Navy Avenger bombers lifted into the sky on what should have been a routine training mission. Hours later, their radio transmissions dissolved into panic, confusion, and disorientation. The ocean no longer looked as it should. Land appeared where no land should be. And before rescue crews could even reach their triangulated position, every one of those aircraft vanished into silence without a splash, without a flare, without a trace. It would not be the first time, and it would not be the last. Welcome to another episode of Beyond the Known. Tonight, we are exploring one of the most enduring enigmas on Earth, the Bermuda Triangle. We'll begin by defining what this region truly is and tracing its most famous disappearances. Then we'll journey through the extraordinary theories that have tried to explain its mysteries. And finally, we'll step back to examine the grounded science behind the phenomenon. Now that we've outlined where this journey will take us tonight, let's begin by grounding ourselves in the facts. Before the theories and speculation, we need to understand what the Bermuda Triangle truly is, where it lies, and how this mystery first took shape.
It's essential we start there, with the geography, because the area we're talking about, the Bermuda Triangle, well, it doesn't officially exist on any government map.
Not at all. The U.S. Board on Geographic Names, for instance, they don't list it.
It's a concept, an urban legend that's been given a kind of spatial definition.
And that definition is a huge, roughly triangular area in the western North Atlantic. For anyone trying to picture it, the points of the triangle are Miami, Florida to the west.
Then the island of Bermuda way out to the north.
And San Juan, Puerto Rico down to the southeast.
And that space covers something like 1.3 million square kilometers of ocean. It even includes some of the deepest points in the entire Atlantic, like the Puerto Rico Trench.
It's important to state right away, though, that this area isn't some remote, empty part of the world.
Far from it. It's one of the busiest air and shipping corridors on the planet. It links the Americas, the Caribbean, and Europe. Any analysis has to start by acknowledging the sheer volume of traffic going through there every single day.
And you've hit on a critical point immediately. Traffic. I mean, just by probability alone, a place that busy is going to have more incidents. Yet this area has a reputation, a kind of sinister brand that other busy zones like the English Channel just don't have. So where did this specific fear come from?
The fear really started to take shape when journalists gave it a name. There were earlier terms like the Devil's Triangle, which is ominous enough.
Right.
But the phrase Bermuda Triangle was really popularized by a writer named Vincent Gaddis. It was in a 1964 magazine article.
And he was the one who started connecting the dots, so to speak.
He detailed several different vanishings and sort of stitched them together into a pattern. And then, well, that concept was picked up and massively amplified by writers like Charles Berlitz in the 70s. His books are what really cemented the triangle's reputation as a place where, the laws of physics just seemed to break down.
Berlitz really turned it from a collection of maritime tragedies into a worldwide cultural phenomenon.
He did. And the incidents he pulled from often stretched back for decades, which created this terrifying, long-standing history.
We should probably start with what is arguably the biggest single disaster linked to the triangle, one that happened long before the name was even coined, the disappearance of the USS Cyclops.
The loss of the Cyclops in March of 1918 is foundational to the myth. The scale of it and the finality. This was a massive Navy collier, almost 550 feet long, designed to haul supplies.
And it was carrying a truly colossal cargo when it vanished.
11,000 tons of extremely dense manganese ore, plus 306 crew members. It just vanished after leaving Barbados.
The last message received from the Cyclops was completely routine. It just said, weather fair, all well.
And that was it. No distress signal, no lifeboats, no wreckage ever found. The ship just ceased to exist. To this day, it's the single largest non-combat loss of life in the history of the United States Navy. That silence is what creates the mystery.
The silence and the pattern that followed.
Yeah. You're talking about the sister ships. And this is where theorists who look for the extraordinary really latch on. Manganese ore isn't just heavy, it's also a notoriously shifting cargo. The Cyclops itself was already known to be structurally stressed.
So maybe not the right ship for that specific unforgiving load?
Perhaps not. And that detail gets magnified when you learn that 2 of its sister ships, the Proteus and the Nereus, also disappeared years later in the North Atlantic, during World War II.
And they were also carrying heavy metallic ore.
They were. So from one perspective, you have a flawed ship design that was vulnerable when hauling dense cargo in heavy seas.
But to someone looking for a different kind of answer, it looks less like an engineering failure.
And more like three massive steel ships being swallowed by the same unknown force, a recurring supernatural event instead of a recurring structural weakness.
The extraordinary explanation is always more compelling than arguing about hull design.
It is. But the incident that truly ignited the modern legend, the one that gave the triangle its sharpest edge, was the tragedy of Flight 19 in December 1945.
Flight 19. 5 TBM Avenger torpedo bombers. 14 airmen lost on what should have been a routine training exercise at Fort Lauderdale.
It was supposed to be a standard navigation problem. They fly east, turn north, and then head west back to base. Simple. The flight was led by Lieutenant Charles Taylor, who was an experienced combat pilot.
But his experience didn't seem to help him that day. The flight it devolved into navigational chaos.
It did. And Taylor, despite his flight hours, had a documented history of getting disoriented. And crucially, he had a tendency to stick with his decisions even when he was being contradicted.
And soon after they should have been turning for home, his radio transmission became panicked. He reported that both of his compasses, the magnetic and the standard, were completely malfunctioning.
And our research has fragments of those transmissions. They really paint a picture of command paralysis. Taylor was insisting they were over the Florida Keys and needed to fly north.
While his junior pilots knew better, there's one transmission that was overheard on the ground. Something like, "We can't tell where we are. Everything is strange. Even the ocean doesn't look as it should."
And another pilot was reportedly heard saying, "Damn it, if we would just fly west, we would get home."
So this is the critical moment. It's disorientation versus the chain of command.
Exactly. Taylor kept issuing these contradictory orders, fly northeast, then reverse again, all because he was stubbornly convinced he was over the Gulf of Mexico, not the Atlantic. He refused to just turn west toward the mainland, which was standard procedure if you were lost.
And in doing so, he led the entire formation farther and farther out over the open ocean.
Until they inevitably ran out of fuel.
The Navy's first investigation, when they found no wreckage, concluded causes or reasons unknown.
They did, but the final report eventually settled on pilot error. It specifically cited Taylor's disorientation and his catastrophic navigational choices. It was a failure of the leader, compounded by the inability of his subordinates to override him.
And then the tragedy got even worse, almost instantly.
The brutal coda. A massive PBM Mariner flying boat was sent out to find Flight 19. It had a crew of 13, and it was loaded with fuel for a long search.
And it vanished just 20 minutes after takeoff.
It did. And on the surface, that looks like another triangle mystery, but our research offers a far more immediate explanation.
The Mariner had a nickname, didn't it?
It did, a disturbing one. It was called the Flying Gas Tank. It had known design issues and a history of fuel vapor explosions.
And a passing merchant ship actually saw something.
It reported seeing a bright flash, a fireball low on the horizon, followed by debris, and a massive oil slick. Given the plane's reputation, that points overwhelmingly to an onboard explosion, not some supernatural force, but psychologically, it doubled the impact of the Flight 19 mystery.
Moving from military to civilian aircraft, the 1940s just kept fueling the legend. There's an eerie symmetry to the losses from British South American Airways.
There is. First, you have the Star Tiger, which vanished on January 30th, 1948, flying from the Azores to Bermuda. The weather was getting worse, and the plane had known mechanical issues. A faulty heater, of all things, forced it to fly at lower, more fuel-hungry altitudes.
And then, almost exactly a year later,
on January 17, 1949, its sister ship, the Star Ariel, vanished between Bermuda and Jamaica. In this case, the pilot reported clear conditions just before they lost contact.
And in both cases, despite huge search efforts.
Absolutely nothing. No wreckage, no debris, no bodies. That complete instant vanishing is the consistent signature of these triangle stories.
Which brings us to some of the maritime incidents that seem to argue most strongly against simple mechanical failure.
Let's consider the SS Marine Sulphur Queen in 1963. This was a 523-foot tanker, and it was carrying highly volatile molten sulfur,
which had to be kept hot,
continuously heated with steam, which caused immense corrosion to the ship's structure. Reports at the time indicated the ship was dangerously unsound, that it often sailed with small fires near the sulfur tanks. It was a disaster waiting for the right push.
So that's another one that points to structural failure, poor maintenance, and hazardous cargo. But then you get a case like the cabin cruiser Witchcraft in 1967.
And this one happened right near the Miami shoreline. The owner, Dan Moore, he was just out with a friend admiring the Christmas lights. He radios the Coast Guard and says they'd struck something near a buoy and needed a tow. A simple, routine call.
But the speed of what happened next is what defines this case.
The Coast Guard sent a vessel immediately. They arrived at the reported position right at the buoy just 20 minutes later. And the boat, the witchcraft, and the two men, they were just gone.
In 20 minutes.
No witnesses, no debris, no plausible way for a boat to sink that quickly in shallow water without leaving some trace. That degree of instant, traceless disappearance, so close to civilization, it really challenges the standard explanations.
When we look back at the historical timeline, before radar and powerful engines, the folklore of this region was already deeply unsettling. Our research points to the 1881 case of the Ellen Austin.
The Ellen Austin account is important because it introduces this idea of localized, strange environmental events long before anyone was talking about aliens or crystals.
What did the crew report?
They reported entering the triangle's waters and being suddenly enveloped by an impossibly thick, localized mist or fog that just blocked all visibility. It wasn't a normal weather front, it was contained. And later, they found a drifting vessel surrounded by this same bizarre phenomenon.
So it speaks to these early maritime experiences of rapid, intense weather shifts that seemed unnatural.
It planted the seed that this area was somehow fundamentally different, cursed or afflicted by unknown forces.
So we have a pattern established over decades. Massive ships vanishing, possibly due to structural flaws. Aircraft disappearing from navigational mistakes or engine trouble. And these instantaneous coastal losses. All of it united by one thing.
The fact that the vast depth and the sheer power of the ocean currents in this high-traffic area seem perfectly designed to rapidly swallow and hide any evidence.
Now that we've mapped the triangle's history and its most compelling cases, it's time to explore the theories that push the boundaries of the ordinary. These are the ideas that have captivated believers, skeptics, and storytellers for decades.
This is where we can move beyond simple structural failure and into the realm of the truly inexplicable. We can focus on the accounts from people who survived highly unusual phenomena inside the triangle's borders.
And these survivors often describe a total breakdown of natural laws, suggesting that some powerful external force is at play.
The most famous story, the one involving a kind of temporal or dimensional anomaly, comes from a pilot named Bruce Gernon Jr. flying toward Bimini in 1970. His experience is what popularized the whole idea of the electronic fog.
His account is chillingly specific. He was flying with his father and a friend when they saw this strange, dark, elliptical cloud just hovering over the ocean.
He described it as intensely strange, a kind of tunnel that he decided to fly into. And once inside, he said, all hell broke loose. Visibility dropped to nothing, and the darkness was punctuated by what he called these extraordinarily bright white flashes.
Flashes that lit up the entire area. And the immediate consequence of entering this fog was total instrument failure.
Every magnetic and electrical system went dead. But the core of the theory, the really strange part, comes from what he claims happened when he finally flew out of it.
This is the time warp element.
Gernon claimed the experience acted as a temporal shortcut. He calculated that he had covered over 100 miles of distance and about 30 minutes of expected flight time in just a little over 3 minutes.
So he landed in Miami, a full 30 minutes ahead of schedule.
He did, which suggested to him that he hadn't just flown through a storm, but that the structure of space-time itself had been temporarily compressed, letting him bypass physical distance.
That is a staggering claim. The idea that a natural event could create a shortcut through reality. Is there anything in the research that even attempts to ground a theory like that in hard science?
There is, surprisingly, and it involves deep space physics. Some scientific analysis looking at magnetic fields and solar activity has been applied to Gernon's account. The theory points to something known as an energy flux transfer event.
An energy flux transfer. Can you break that down? What is it, and why would it cause something like an electronic fog?
Certainly. So the sun is constantly sending high-energy particles toward Earth through the solar wind. Our planet is protected by its magnetosphere, its magnetic shield. And energy flux transfer happens when, due to intense solar activity, a kind of magnetic portal momentarily opens in that shield.
A temporary hole.
Essentially, yes. A transient hole that allows those high-energy particles to flow directly into our atmosphere.
And if that happened over the triangle, a region already known for magnetic strangeness, what would the physical effect be?
The huge influx of high-energy particles would cause immense electromagnetic aberrations in the atmosphere. It could potentially create visible clouds of energy, what Gurnon called the electronic fog. And that intense, unstable magnetic field would instantly cause navigational instruments to fail and could, at least in theory, distort space and time.
So it's a mechanism that proposes a natural, highly unstable magnetic vortex.
It basically tries to turn the paranormal idea of a time warp into a very rare, high-energy meteorological event.
And whether it's caused by the sun or something more intentional, this magnetic peculiarity, it forms the basis for almost all the extraordinary explanations, including the ones involving extraterrestrials.
UFO abduction theories are a natural fit for the idea of a traceless disappearance. If a ship or plane just vanishes instantly, without an SOS leaving no debris, the simplest explanation to some is that it was intentionally taken.
Removed from the planet.
Right. UFO enthusiasts theorize the craft are taken for scientific curiosity, or maybe to collect human specimens for preservation before some predicted global catastrophe, like a nuclear war.
Our culture has really internalized that idea.
Yeah.
You just have to think of the opening of the film, Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Where the lost bombers of Flight 19 are discovered decades later, pristine and intact, in the Sonoran Desert.
That scene firmly establishes the disappearance as an act of extraterrestrial collection.
And Charles Berlitz, who was a major proponent of the UFO theory, he specifically suggested that UFOs were drawn to the triangle because of its magnetic peculiarities. He believed their sensitive technology might be activating, or maybe just using, these existing natural electromagnetic aberrations to conduct their activities.
Which brings us to probably the most popular and enduring supernatural explanation for the triangle's power. The lost civilization of Atlantis.
The Atlantean theory is compelling because it gives an immediate answer to why the specific piece of the ocean is affected. The proponents connect it directly to the prophetic readings of Edgar Cayce, the sleeping prophet.
And Cayce claimed that Atlantis was vastly more advanced than us technologically, and that its remnants would start to reappear in the late 1960s.
And remarkably, that prophecy's timeline coincided perfectly with a major discovery in the Bahamas.
In 1968, J. Manson Valentine, who was a strong believer in the Atlantis theory, discovered what's now known as the Bimini Road.
It's a vast, submerged series of stones laid out in these straight and curved patterns off the coast of Bimini. Believers immediately saw this as definitive proof of Atlantean architecture, a dock, or a seawall, maybe a road leading to the sunken city.
And visually, it does look like powerful evidence. A massive artificial-looking structure found exactly when a prophet predicted it would be.
Visually, it is very convincing. But a responsible look at this requires balance. Geologists have rigorously examined the Bimini Road.
And then their conclusion.
They overwhelmingly conclude that it's a natural phenomenon known as beach rock. Beach rock forms when sand and limestone get cemented together in the intertidal zone, and then it fractures into these large, blocky patterns that look man-made. They argue the ocean currents just created that suggestive linear alignment.
So a captivating discovery interpreted as proof of a lost civilization, when science argues it's just naturally formed underwater pavement. But the Atlantean theory goes a step further than just ruins. It suggests there's an active power source still down there.
This is the infamous crystal power source theory. The core belief is that Atlantis was powered by a gigantic solar crystal, a source of immense energy that is still intact at the bottom of the triangle.
And this crystal is believed to be active.
Actively generating powerful electromagnetic forces that are sending modern instruments haywire and, pulling vessels to their doom. It's the perfect explanation for the sudden instrument failure reported by Flight 19 and Bruce Gurnon.
This theory really gained traction with a highly publicized, though very controversial, claim made by a Dr. Ray Brown in 1970.
Brown claimed he was diving near the Bahamas and discovered a gigantic, illuminated, glass-like pyramidal structure on the ocean floor, bigger than any structure on Earth.
He also claimed he went inside.
He did. And that he retrieved a 4-inch crystal sphere and a red gem. Proponents of the Atlantis theory seized on this as irrefutable evidence of functioning, powerful Atlantean technology causing all the disturbances.
But that is a classic example of a claim without any subsequent physical evidence. If an illuminated glass pyramid and a powerful crystal existed, surely the last 50 years of oceanography would have confirmed it.
You would think so. Skeptics note that Brown never produced the pyramid, only the small crystal sphere, which can't be definitively traced to any archaeological site. But in mythology, the story is what matters. The idea of a powerful, ancient, non-human technology actively interfering with our modern craft is a profoundly satisfying explanation for an instantaneous tragedy.
So whether it's an ancient crystal, extraterrestrial collectors, or a time warp caused by the sun, these extraordinary theories persist because they offer a definitive, powerful answer to a complex, tragic phenomenon.
They do. They fulfill a psychological need for an explanation that matches the bizarre nature of the events. And that persistence is amplified by the consistency of certain eyewitness reports. You have multiple pilots and sailors describing similar things: wildly spinning compasses, intense white flashes, localized fog, total electronic failure, all happening in the same geographic footprint. It strongly suggests that something highly unusual is happening here, even if the source isn't supernatural.
At first, it might seem like the only explanation is something extraordinary. But this is beyond the known, and this is the part where we step back and let science and grounded reason offer their side of the story.
This is where we apply rigorous scrutiny, because while the stories are compelling, the statistical reality analyzed thoroughly by organizations like NOAA and Lloyd's of London, it tells a far more pedestrian, though equally dangerous, tale about this stretch of ocean.
The most famous and effective challenge to the supernatural narrative came from an author named Larry Kusha in his 1975 research, The Bermuda Triangle Mystery, Solved. And Kusha didn't just dismiss the theories, he meticulously dismantled the foundational data used by opponents like Berlitz.
Kusha's method was brilliant because it was so simple and so devastating in its results. He cross-referenced every single case cited by Berlitz and Gaddis with contemporary weather reports, shipping logs, and local newspapers.
And his key finding was that sensationalist writers either intentionally or just ignorantly omitted crucial details.
The biggest omissions were about the weather. He found that many incidents Berlitz listed as happening in calm, clear conditions were, in fact, occurring during known violent tropical storms or hurricanes. The reason a ship vanished without an SOS was simply because the conditions were so sudden and severe they didn't have time to call for help.
But his most scandalous finding was about geography.
Kusha revealed that many so-called Bermuda Triangle mysteries happened hundreds of miles outside the triangle's boundaries. Some were off the coast of Ireland, others in the Pacific. He even found cases where ships reported missing or just late due to bad weather and arrived safely later on.
And Berlitz never bothered to correct the record.
He listed them permanently as vanished. Kusha's conclusion was definitive. When you filter for traffic volumes, severe weather, and proper geography, the accident rate in the Bermuda Triangle is not statistically higher than any other high-traffic area.
That reframes the entire discussion. If the danger is statistical and environmental, why does the legend feel so unique? I would argue it's because the environmental causes here are so dramatically efficient at erasing the evidence.
That is the crucial element, the environment's ability to conceal tragedy. And the first factor is the Gulf Stream. It's effectively a 60-mile wide, warm, swift river flowing within the ocean itself.
How fast does it move, and why is that so relevant to a missing plane or ship?
The Gulf Stream's surface velocity can exceed 5 miles per hour. That may not sound fast, but in ocean terms, it's a tremendous, relentless force. Any light debris from a crash can be swept hundreds of miles away from the initial location before a search even begins.
So it explains why the wreckage from so many of these cases was never found near their last reported position.
The debris was rapidly dispersed and sunk far outside the search grid. And then there's the weather itself, which seems almost custom designed for sudden, instant catastrophe.
The region's meteorology is uniquely volatile. It's where the warm, moist air of the Gulf Stream collides violently with colder air masses from the north.
And that interaction leads to the rapid formation of dangerous localized phenomena, specifically microbursts.
We hear that term microburst in connection with aviation, but what exactly is it? What kind of force does it exert?
A microburst is a powerful, localized column of sinking cold air inside a thunderstorm. It hits the surface like a bomb, generating these incredibly powerful horizontal wind bursts that can explode outward.
And the winds can shift almost instantly.
Our research mentioned the sinking of the sailing vessel Pride of Baltimore in 1986. A microburst struck, and the wind velocity instantly went from 20 miles per hour to over 90. That force is more than enough to capsize a large vessel or drive an aircraft straight into the sea before an SOS can be sent. It's localized, sudden, and devastating. It mimics the traceless, instant vanishing of the legends.
So if microbursts can explain the planes, what about the giant ships like the Cyclops? This is where the rogue wave theory comes into play.
Oceanographer Dr. Simon Boxall and others have championed the rogue wave theory. And rogue waves aren't just big waves. They are massive, unpredictable walls of water that can rise nearly 100 feet.
And they form when multiple storm wave systems collide and their energy amplifies into a single colossal strike.
And the danger is that they strike suddenly, often without warning, even outside the worst storm conditions. Simulations suggest that a rogue wave hitting a loaded vessel like the USS Cyclops from the side, with its heavy, shifting manganese ore, could have easily overwhelmed the ship.
It could break its back.
And sink within minutes. That rapid sinking is perfectly consistent with the lack of an SOS. The crew simply wouldn't have had time. The ship goes down instantly, leaving no survivors and minimal debris.
Then we have the startling geological theory that ties together both marine and atmospheric hazards, the methane hydrate release hypothesis. This is maybe the most scientifically exotic, yet plausible explanation.
This theory concerns large deposits of natural gas, or methane hydrates, that are locked in a frozen, icy state on the continental shelves deep beneath the seafloor.
And geological events like underwater landslides can destabilize these deposits,
triggering a sudden, massive release of methane gas. As those huge bubbles of gas rise through the water, they dramatically decrease the density of the water around them.
So if a ship happens to be right above that plume,
the water instantly loses its buoyancy. The ship, regardless of its size, would sink instantly, as if passing over a hole in the sea. It's a clean, elegant explanation for a traceless sinking without any visible cause.
And the theory also extends above the surface to affect aircraft.
A methane plume rising above the water could displace the oxygen in the lower atmosphere. If a plane flew through that pocket of methane-rich, oxygen-depleted air, it could cause immediate engine flameout, or even worse, pilot incapacitation. The aircraft falls, the gas plume dissipates, and there's no evidence left of what caused the crash.
So beyond environmental catastrophe, the dominance of human and mechanical error provides the final piece of the grounded explanation. Starting with the complications of navigation itself, especially before modern GPS.
The Bermuda Triangle is one of only 2 places on Earth where zero magnetic declination occurs. This is a very specific navigational problem.
Can you explain magnetic declination?
It's the angular difference between true north, the geographic North Pole, and magnetic north, the point your compass actually points to. Navigators have to constantly calculate this angle to correct their compass reading and find their true heading.
So in the triangle, this difference is 0. Why is that confusing? Wouldn't compass pointing exactly to true north be helpful?
It seems like it would be. But historically, skilled navigators relied on the known difference between the two norths to verify their position. When they enter a region where the 2 points align, their primary verification tool is gone. If their compass was already malfunctioning, which was common, they lose their ability to trust their instruments. This condition heavily exacerbated the crisis that a pilot like Lieutenant Taylor faced.
Let's revisit Flight 19 through this lens of zero declination and human fallibility. The mystery really diminishes, but the tragedy becomes more profound.
The naval investigation ultimately rested on Taylor's known history of disorientation. The critical fact is that the flight was exactly where it was supposed to be before Taylor's flawed decisions began. He convinced himself the islands he saw were the Florida Keys, and he rejected the possibility they were the Bahamas.
And the panic and command paralysis that followed. It highlights a failure of what we now call crew resource management.
Precisely. Despite the other pilots having functional compasses and even saying over the radio, "If we fly west, we get home," the chain of command meant they followed Taylor's fatal directive to steer northeast out into the open ocean until they ran out of fuel. It was an organizational failure.
And we still see modern analogies that echo this combination of human challenges and natural elements. It demonstrates that the triangle still claims lives, not through magic, but through the overwhelming power of the ocean.
The 2015 case of the 2 14-year-old boys, Perry Cohen and Austin Stefanos, who vanished off Florida, is a perfect contemporary example. They went out in rough weather without proper safety or communication devices. Their boat was found months later near Bermuda.
It shows how human misjudgment, combined with the power of the Gulf Stream and sudden storms, results in profound loss, even today with all our advanced technology.
The triangle may not be cursed, but it is certainly unforgiving.
Throughout this journey, we explored the dramatic disappearances, the powerful legends, and the extraordinary theories that try to explain why this region continues to capture global imagination. The evidence supporting unusual electrical disturbances, disorientation, and instrument failure is compelling, and many seasoned pilots and sailors have described events that seem to push the limits of ordinary explanation.
But when we weigh every story against the full spectrum of scientific data, the most prevalent explanation remains rooted in natural forces. Fast-forming storms, powerful methane release possibilities, strong ocean currents, human navigational challenges, and the immense traffic volume through this region. These factors appear sufficient to explain the majority of documented cases. Still, certain incidents, including Flight 19 and the bizarre accounts of temporal anomalies, present details that remain difficult to reconcile. And while science offers the clearest framework, it does not close every doorway to the unknown. The Bermuda Triangle, even when viewed through the lens of evidence, continues to occupy a place where mystery and reality subtly overlap.
That's it for this journey beyond the known. If the unknown calls to you, do not forget to like, subscribe, and follow. There is so much more waiting to be discovered. And if you really want to help us out, consider becoming a member. With Secret Passage, you will unlock early access to our episodes, our audiobook library, Audiobook Underground, and a rotating list of curated wonders, other videos we recommend for curious minds. For those who want it all, Vault Access gives you everything, plus a board seat where you can request topics for us to explore in future episodes. Your support keeps the adventure alive.